Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Yeah, so what's with all these Android TV boxes? Why would somebody be featuring these on their channel in 2026 when these are like 10-year-old boxes? Well, it comes down to this and how I run my channel. So, how do I choose a project to work on? It's called random selection. So what happens is I go to the thrift store. I don't buy anything on eBay. I just go to the thrift store. And if they happen to have a laptop, well, I'm going to get that first, right? Laptops are way more flexible. Or if they have even a Raspberry Pi, which I picked up 2 of those over time, I would get those. But when the well is dry and I don't have a lot of options, well, we turn to these things. And I'd seen people put Linux on these things on YouTube, but then when I actually dug deeper, I discovered that even the people who did put Linux on it, they looked really crashy and unstable. And yet they would call it a win, but I would call it a fail in my personal opinion of these kinds of things. So why, what do I do with these boxes now that I picked them up? Because I failed to get them to boot into a Linux distro that was certainly stable. So my next choice was, well, what do I do with these things? What will I do with these things? So let's get that out of the way. There we go. So yeah, so what do I do with these boxes, right? What do I do with a Linux box? 2, 3, 4. Well, the one that was completely locked down and I couldn't really do anything with it because it required a internet connection, like a web connection, just to do absolutely anything. Well, that one got recycled because I'm not going to hook that up to my network. In fact, none of these are going to ever see a network ever in my experience, because I don't trust any of this stuff. These are like malware just waiting to happen. But I do think they're really cool little devices, and I look at them from the standpoint of a Raspberry Pi device. If you've used a Raspberry Pi 3, this is roughly what you're dealing with, this kind of technology. And I've fooled around with Raspberry Pi, even with Armbian on a Raspberry Pi. And, it works fine for what it is. Forget about the web. And as far as these devices are concerned, forget about the web. But they do have like some pretty interesting aspects to them. And this one, why it's like a bad idea from the start as a consumer device, is out of the factory, it's rooted. So you're in root. You have full control over this thing without a password. The malware that you can pick up from a system like this, just watching videos and stuff like that on your TV, is it's not even funny how open this box is. And so my feeling is it's not it's not a consumer device at all. It is more of a tinker box. Like, you can tinker around, fool around with these things. If you want to learn more about Termux, which this is their terminal that you can install. And you can side load all kinds of apps on this. You don't have to go online to get apps. You can side load all kinds of apps on this thing. Experiment with it. And my goal initially was to get Linux running on it with like, OpenOffice or LibreOffice or something along those lines, right? And after I realized this wasn't going to work, I thought, well, why can't I use, a Android OS running the apps that I want it to run. So I thought, well, why not, right? I can probably get it to work. And how different is this from a Linux system? I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. You've got a start menu, you got your apps that are available. They open up. The only difference is you can't do multiple screens, like multiple apps open on the same screen. They just more or less take over the entire screen. But, you know, for Termux, it's fine. Or for, you know, I don't happen to have the Office program on this one, but, you know, like a WPS, Kingsoft, you know, word processor or Excel or whatever, it's going to work great under this sort of a situation. And because it's rooted, you can get your files off your system and just plug in a USB stick into here, transfer your files. You never have to go online. That's the beauty of all three of these boxes. The other box was so dependent on going online because, of course, it wants you to go online so you can become a part of the malware botnet that it's pre-installed on it. So it's locked down so much just to get you to go online, just so you can become part of their botnet. And that's not going to happen. So is older better? Is, you know, 1 gigabyte or 2 gigabytes of RAM better than 4? Well, in a case like this, yeah. These systems are quad core, I believe, most of them. The other one was a octa-core, 8-core, with 4 gig of RAM and a 32 gigabyte not hard drive, but memory storage. None of these have anything anywhere near that, but they're better. Why? Because they're rooted, they are offline, and they work completely fine offline because of Android 5 and 6, which these run. As soon as you get into Android 11, you're so locked out of everything, you become dependent on booting these things into onto a network to do anything. And a network is not what you want to put a malware box on. You're going to be in a world of pain. So don't use these newer boxes. But these, if you're sandboxing them and you're just running them on a network, they're great. They're great. You can sideload a ton of different apps. You can experiment with the Android OS. If you're not familiar with the Android OS, which I'm not that familiar with, I mean, beyond a few phones and stuff, this is giving me all kinds of access to digging into how they organize their file system. And these systems allow me to go pretty deep into the actual system. And there's other, you know, file explorers you can install. There's, you name it. Like, there's so much to the Android ecosystem that I don't even know about. But, you know, just installing 2 apps, I can add, you know, shutdown. I can add a terminal to it, and that's only 2 apps that I've added, and that gives you an incredible power, especially if you're under root. Which, if you don't know what that means, it means basically you have full control over the system. You can shut down, you know, a bunch of applications that don't make any sense to be running and save all your precious resources. In the end, you might actually have a leaner system than like an Android 11 system with more resources because there's so much garbage running on them. But if you're not really like, I mean, if you're offline, are you going to need email? No, you can get rid of that. You can uninstall it, or you can kill the processes that would eat up your RAM for email. And camera, well, there's no camera on this. You can get rid of that. There's so much you can get rid of. You can get this thing down to the bare bones, and you might be surprised how powerful this thing runs with the little processor inside it, quad core, a lot of them, and, you know, 1 or 2 gig of memory, but used very economically. So that's it. That's kind of like, I thought, hey, you guys have to understand what my goal was here with this project, because I haven't really laid it out. But really my goal here when I started picking up these boxes was actually to get Linux on them. When I couldn't get Linux on them, I thought, well, these boxes actually have a lot of potential as learning tools for me to understand more about the Android OS, what it can do, as well as hacking it, because these things are rooted. When I found out I could from the terminal, I could actually get to root without a password. I thought, wow, these are open boxes. These are open systems. How much can you do in those systems? How much can you tweak? How much can you fool around with, hack, and do whatever you want with them? Like, you have basically the keys to the kingdom when you have root access. And how often do you experience that in any kind of operating system that's manufactured as an appliance? Try and root a, I don't know, Roku or a Apple TV or any kind, or Chromebot, what did they call those things? Chromecast. Try and root any of those things. Try and get it into root access of that. Those things are so locked down, they're just like hockey pucks after they're done. After they become obsolete, you can pretty much use them as hockey pucks, because they're not going to be any use to anybody. But this has still got lots of potential. So that's what this project has kind of evolved into. And just so you understand how I run my channel, I start off by finding the device at the thrift store. So it might be that, it might be this device, it might be this device. And I go, can I use this in some practical way? Like, like as a, like, how can I save this from e-waste is sort of my goal. What can I do with this thing? And aren't these things really just like Raspberry Pi computers in a box? In the form of a set-top box? Aren't they really that? They are. If they weren't so locked down, they'd really be very similar to a Raspberry Pi. In some cases, even more powerful than the, say, Pi 3. But they're so locked down and they're so gimped that sometimes you just have to recycle them, because they're getting close to being pretty much a Apple TV, Roku, locked down box, walled garden, however you want to put it, that they're useless. But I love the concept of open software, open hardware, to the point where you can do a lot with these systems, just with what they are. And root access to Android, to me, is like a world of exploration. So I'm really happy I picked these up. I recycled the fourth one because even though it had more resources and more power, it was going to just be a malware delivery system. And who needs that in your life, right? So there you go, guys. These are going to be sandboxed, air-gapped, but rooted. And I'm going to be able to dig into that Android world out there, find the more cooler, interesting sort of apps, install them, and see what this thing can do without the net. Because this is really sort of how it morphed into this project. My idea was, there's all these little small form factor PCs that are being produced now. Can I turn one of these things into something similar and run productivity software, like, for example, WPS Office, or a Termux terminal, or I don't know. I'm gonna have to find out what other options there are. As you start to dig in, sometimes you find, hey, this just runs games really well. Is there games that would be fun to play on this thing? I don't know. We'll find out. So a lot of times with me, it isn't like I sit here going, what am I going to make for a video that's going to make people watch my videos? It's more like, hey, I found this. Should I pick it up? Well, let me go on my phone. Oh, some people put Linux on it. Okay, I'll pick it up. Oh, this one? And that didn't, that failed. Well, maybe this one. Maybe this one. They're $5. What the hell? Or, hey, you know, even if they're a complete fail, I learned something, right? It's about learning through doing. Because I'll tell you something right now. In the real world, nobody learns out of a book. That's a stage one learning process. It's doing that gets you there. You don't, a trip of 1,000 miles is the first step, not reading about the first step, if you understand what I mean. So there you go, guys. That's going to be my video. Hope you're having a great Sunday, and I will see you in the next one.